Silas Thorne was a man who knew the value of silence. In the high, scorched basins of New Mexico, silence was the only thing the wind couldn't steal. Silas lived on the edge of a world that had forgotten him, and he liked it that way. He had a small cabin, a herd of cattle that looked as tired as he felt, and a past that stayed buried under the red dust. Until the afternoon the girl appeared. Hold on, folks, before we'll move on, I want to take a moment, hit that subscribe button, and give this story a like. Now let's begin. She didn't come by horse. She came on foot, stumbling through the heat haze like a ghost seeking a place to haunt. Her dress was torn, the hem caked in dry mud, and her eyes, they were the eyes of someone who looked into the abyss and realized the abyss was looking back. She collapsed 20 yards from his porch. No scream, no plea, just the soft thud of a body hitting the sun-baked earth. Silas didn't move at first. He gripped his whittling knife a little tighter, his heart a slow, heavy drum in his chest. He had spent 15 years avoiding the troubles of other people. But the West has a way of bringing trouble to your front door and asking what kind of man you really are. He carried her inside. She was light, too light, like a bird with broken wings. He laid her on the old cot near the stove, the same place he'd slept for a decade of lonely nights. Her skin was burning, but she was shivering. Silas moved with the practiced efficiency of a man who had patched up wounded soldiers in a war he tried not to remember. He cleaned the cuts on her feet. He bathed her forehead with cool water from the well. He didn't ask her name. Names didn't matter when the fever was talking. For 3 days, the only sound in the cabin was her ragged breathing and the whistle of the wind through the floorboards. Silas sat at his table, a cup of bitter, black coffee in his hands, watching the door. Out here, you didn't look for help. You looked for the shadow that followed the help. He cleaned his Winchester 3 times. Not because it was dirty, but because the mechanical click of the brass gave his hands something to do besides shake. On the 4th morning, she opened her eyes. They were green, like the high mountain grass after spring rain, but they were clouded with a terror that made Silas's stomach twist. She didn't thank him. She didn't ask where she was. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and gripped Silas's forearm with a strength born of pure desperation. She pulled him close, her breath smelling of fever and old sage. "He's coming," she whispered. Her voice was a dry rattle, barely audible over the crackle of the fire. Silas looked at her, his face a mask of weathered stone. "Who's coming, girl?" She shook her head, tears carving tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "He'll kill us both if he finds out I'm here. He doesn't leave things behind. He doesn't lose property." Property. The word hit Silas like a physical blow. He'd heard men talk like that before. Men who thought the world was a ledger, and they owned every line of it. He stood up, walking to the window, staring out at the horizon where the sky met the mesa in a jagged line of purple and gold. "You're on Thorne land now," Silas said, his voice low and steady, like the rumble of distant thunder. "Nobody takes anything from this patch of dirt. Not anymore." What Silas Thorne didn't realize, what he couldn't have known in that moment, was that some ghosts don't stay in the past. Some ghosts ride horses. Some ghosts carry badges. And some ghosts share their own blood. If you're still here with us, listening to this tale of the high desert, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. It helps us keep these stories of the Old West alive. And tell us in the comments, where are you listening from today? Is the sun shining where you are, or is a storm brewing on your horizon? Now, let's north. A man who ruled with a whip and a Bible. A man who saw her as a trophy, a prize to be kept in a cage of gold and iron. Silas listened, and with every word she spoke, a cold fire began to burn in his chest. It was a fire he thought he'd extinguished at Gettysburg. It was the fire of a man who was tired of seeing the weak trampled by the boots of the cruel. Late that afternoon, the air got still. The birds stopped singing in the scrub brush. Silas was out on the porch, sharpening his axe, when he heard it, the rhythmic thud of hoofbeats. Not 1 horse. 4, maybe 5, coming fast up the ridge road. He didn't run. He didn't panic. He stood up, wiped the grit from his hands, and stepped inside the cabin. Clara was already standing in the center of the room, her face pale, her hands pressed against her mouth. "He's here," she choked out. Silas pointed to the small root cellar beneath the floorboards. Get down. Don't make a sound, no matter what you hear. Silas, please. Get down, he commanded. It wasn't a request. It was the voice of a man who was back in the trenches. He watched her disappear into the dark, sliding the rug back over the trapdoor. Then Silas took his seat at the table. He laid his Winchester across his lap, not aiming at the door, but ready. He waited. The horses pulled up outside. The dust billowed through the gaps in the door. He heard the creak of leather, the jingle of spurs. Then a voice called out, a voice that made Silas's heart stop in his chest, a voice he hadn't heard in 15 years. Yet he heard it every night in his nightmares. Silas, I know you're in there. Boy, a son shouldn't keep his father waiting on the porch like a common beggar. Silas felt the world tilt. He stood up, his movements slow and mechanical. He walked to the door and pulled it open. Standing there, bathed in the orange light of the dying sun, was a man who looked like a twisted version of Silas himself. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a beard as white as a mountain peak and eyes that held the coldness of a winter moon. Silas Thorne, the man Silas had fled. The man Silas had been told was killed in a saloon fire in San Francisco a decade. Elias smirked, stepping forward. Silas didn't move to let him in, but Elias didn't care. He leaned against the doorframe, his hand resting casually on the butt of a pearl-handled Colt. You look well, Silas. A bit more gray in the beard, a bit more bitterness in the eyes. I taught you that, didn't I? I taught you how to survive. I survived you, Pa, Silas said, his grip tightening on the rifle. That was the hard part. What are you doing on my land? Elias laughed, a dry, hollow sound. Your land? Silas, everything in this territory belongs to the man with the most iron. And right now, I'm looking for something that belongs to me. A girl, young, green eyes, a bit of a temper. My men tracked her trail right to your ridge. Inside the cabin, Silas could almost feel Clara's heart beating through the floorboards. He looked his father in the eye. There's no girl here, Pa. Just me and the wind. Elias's smirk faded. The air between them turned electric. The men behind Elias, hired guns with hollowed-out souls, shifted in their saddles. Don't lie to me, boy, Elias whispered. I know the smell of a lie. It smells like fear. Now step aside. Let me search the house. And maybe I'll leave you with your dignity. You aren't going inside, Silas said. He raised a Winchester. He didn't aim it at the men. He aimed it straight at his father's heart. I spent my whole life being afraid of you. I ran halfway across a continent to get away from the shadow you cast. But I'm done running. This dirt is mine, and anyone on it is under my protection. Elias stared at the barrel of the gun. For a second, Silas saw something flicker in his father's eyes. Not regret, not love, but a grim sort of pride. You always were the best shot I had, Silas, Elias said. In the blink of an eye, the world exploded. Elias moved for his Colt, but Silas was faster. He didn't fire to kill, not yet. He fired into the dirt at the lead horse's feet. The animal reared, screaming, throwing the line of riders into chaos. He whistled, a sharp, piercing sound. His men began to retreat, backing their horses away, guns still leveled. This isn't over, Silas. Elias shouted over the wind. You can't keep her forever. The West is a small place for people who try to be heroes. Silas watched them until they were nothing more than specks of dust on the horizon. Only then did he let the rifle drop. His hands were shaking now. He went inside and opened the trapdoor. Clara climbed out, her face streaked with tears. She looked at him, not as a savior, but as a man who would finally face his own monster. They didn't talk much that night. Silas sat on the porch, watching the stars. He knew his father would be back. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month. But the storm was coming. Yet, for the first time in 15 years, Silas Thorne wasn't afraid. He realized then that the West doesn't just test your strength. It tests your soul. It asks if you're willing to stand in the doorway against your own blood, to do what's right. Sometimes, A man has to break his past to build a future. If this story touched something in you, give it a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear about the courage to stand still. And don't forget to subscribe for more journeys into the heart of the Old West. Because out here, the stories don't end. They just keep writing.